General Kethvar stood before the massive viewing screen in the command center of the Veltar Empire's most secret military facility. The screen showed images of a small blue planet floating in the darkness of space. Earth. For the past 100 years, this world had consumed his every thought, his every plan, his very existence. The general's three eyes focused on the data streams flowing across multiple displays. Human cities, human weapons, human behavior patterns. All of it carefully studied, cataloged, and analyzed. His research teams had spent decades intercepting Earth's communications, stealing their satellite feeds, and watching their military exercises from the shadows of space. "Sir," came a voice behind him. Commander Zelnok approached with a data tablet in his clawed hands. "The final training results are complete. Our soldiers have achieved a 98% success rate in all combat simulations." Kethvar turned away from the screen, his tall gray form casting a long shadow across the metal floor. The Veltar were naturally gifted warriors. Their bodies were stronger than humans, their reflexes faster, their technology far superior. But Kethvar had learned long ago that strength alone did not guarantee victory. Preparation did. "Show me the human military response scenarios," he commanded. Zelnok activated the tablet, and holographic images filled the air around them. Tiny human soldiers moved through simulated battles, fighting against virtual Veltar forces. Each scenario had been run thousands of times, with every possible human strategy accounted for. "Their nuclear weapons are primitive but dangerous," Zelnok explained as mushroom clouds bloomed in the holographic display. "Our shields can deflect most of their missiles, but we must be careful not to let them launch too many at once." Kethvar nodded. The humans had shown their willingness to use such weapons before. His intelligence teams had studied every war in human history, from their ancient battles with swords and shields to their modern conflicts with tanks and aircraft. They were a violent species, but their violence was predictable. "What about their ground forces?" the general asked. "Standard formation tactics," Zelnok replied, changing the holographic display. "They move in organized units, follow chain of command structures, and rely heavily on their vehicles and aircraft. Our soldiers have trained against every type of human military formation, documented in their historical records." The hologram showed Veltar warriors easily defeating human soldiers in battle after battle. Their superior strength and advanced energy weapons cut through human defenses like a blade through paper. It was almost too easy. Kethvar walked to another section of the command center, where dozens of technicians monitored screens showing real-time feeds from Earth. He could see humans going about their daily lives, completely unaware that they were being watched. They sat in their coffee shops, walked their small animals, and stared at their primitive communication devices. "They are so weak," he thought to himself, "so unprepared." The Veltar Empire had conquered 17 worlds before Earth. Each conquest had followed the same pattern. Study the enemy, prepare for their defenses, strike hard and fast, claim victory. But Earth was different. Earth was special. Not because the humans were stronger or smarter than other species the Veltar had defeated, but because they had something that fascinated Kethvar: unpredictability. In all his years of study, the general had never encountered a species quite like humans. They could be peaceful one moment and violent the next. They created beautiful art and terrible weapons with equal skill. They showed great kindness to their own kind, while destroying their own planet's environment. They were a contradiction that both puzzled and intrigued him. But contradictions could be studied, patterns could be found, and weaknesses could be exploited. That was why Kethvar had spent a full century preparing for this invasion. He would not make the mistake of underestimating his enemy. "Take me to the training facility," he ordered. Zelnok led him through the corridors of the massive space station that served as their preparation center. The facility was larger than most cities, containing perfect replicas of human environments. There were mock-ups of human streets, buildings, and military bases. Every detail had been recreated with precise accuracy, from the shape of their vehicles to the smell of their food. They entered a large chamber where Veltar soldiers were engaged in combat training. The warriors moved through a simulated human city, their energy weapons destroying targets that looked exactly like human soldiers. The training was intense and realistic. Explosions echoed through the chamber as the Veltar forces practiced urban warfare tactics. "Beautiful," Kethvar whispered as he watched his soldiers work. 100 years of preparation and they are perfect. The soldiers moved like deadly dancers, each one knowing exactly where to go and what to do. They had been trained to fight in every type of human environment: cities, forests, deserts, and even underwater. They knew how to counter human tanks, aircraft, and infantry. They had studied human psychology and knew how to break human morale. "General," called out Training Commander Yextal as he approached, "would you like to observe the final scenario?" Kethvar nodded, and the commander activated a new training program. The chamber transformed into a perfect replica of a major human city. Veltar soldiers dropped from simulated spacecraft and began their assault. They moved through the streets with precision, neutralizing human resistance points with brutal efficiency. In the simulation, human soldiers tried to fight back with their primitive weapons, but they were no match for Veltar technology. Human aircraft fell from the sky, their tanks were destroyed, and their infantry scattered in panic. Within minutes, the city was under Veltar control. "Estimated time for complete planetary conquest?" Kethavar asked. 72 hours, sir," Yextal replied with confidence. "That includes time for mopping up remaining resistance and establishing control centers in all major population areas." Kethavar smiled, an expression that showed rows of sharp teeth. 72 hours to conquer an entire world. His century of preparation was about to pay off. He thought about the human leaders who would soon face his forces. They had no idea what was coming. Their primitive sensor technology could not detect Veltar ships when they wanted to remain hidden. Their military forces were scattered across their planet, focused on fighting each other rather than watching the stars for real threats. "Sir," Zelnok interrupted his thoughts, "the invasion fleet is ready. 50,000 of our finest warriors, equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. When do we begin?" Kethavar looked at the screen showing peaceful human cities. Soon those cities would burn. Soon humanity would learn that they were not alone in the universe, and that their new neighbors were not friendly. "We launch in 7 rotations," he declared. "The humans have lived in ignorance long enough. It is time for them to meet their new masters." The command center filled with activity as officers began preparing for the invasion. Ship commanders received their orders. Soldiers checked their equipment and technicians ran final tests on all systems. Everything had to be perfect. Kethavar had not spent a century planning this conquest only to have it fail due to some small oversight. As he watched the preparations, the general allowed himself to feel a moment of satisfaction. He had done everything right. He had studied the enemy thoroughly, trained his forces completely, and planned for every possible scenario. The humans would fall quickly and the Veltar Empire would claim another world. But deep in his mind, a small voice whispered a warning. The humans were unpredictable. What if there was something he had missed? What if his century of preparation was not enough? Kethavar pushed the thought away. He was being foolish. No species in the galaxy could stand against the might of the Veltar Empire, especially not one as primitive as humanity. In a few short days, Earth would belong to him, and the humans would be nothing more than subjects in his new domain. The blue planet continued to spin peacefully on the viewing screen, its inhabitants unaware that their world was about to change forever. Captain Daeho Kim sat at his favorite street cafe in Seoul, holding a warm cup of coffee in both hands. The morning air was cool and fresh, and the city was slowly waking up around him. Traffic moved steadily down the wide street. People walked past on their way to work, and vendors were setting up their food stalls for the lunch rush that would come later. Daeho was not supposed to be here. As a captain in the South Korean military, he should have been at his base preparing for morning drills. But his unit had been given a rare day off, and he had decided to spend it at this small cafe where nobody knew his rank or cared about military business. Here he was just another man drinking coffee and watching the world go by. At the table next to him, a young woman named So Young Park was typing on her laptop. She was a college student working on her final project for her communications class. Her phone sat beside her laptop, occasionally buzzing with messages from her friends. She wore headphones and seemed lost in her work, completely focused on the screen in front of her. Across the street, businessman Woo Jin Lee was waiting for a taxi. He checked his expensive watch and frowned. He was already late for an important meeting and the traffic was getting worse by the minute. He pulled out his phone and started making calls, trying to reschedule his appointments for the day. None of them noticed the small shimmer in the clear blue sky above the city. General Kathvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display show Seoul below. His intelligence teams had chosen this target carefully. Seoul was a major population center with over 9 million humans. It had significant military installations nearby, important government buildings, and major communication networks. When Seoul fell, the shock would spread across the entire planet. All ships, prepare to decloak, he ordered into his communication device. Around him, 50 massive Veltar warships materialized in the sky above Seoul. Each ship was over a kilometer long, their dark metal hulls blocking out portions of the morning sun. The ships hung in the air like giant predators, their weapon systems powered and ready. Begin Phase 1, Kethver commanded. Daeho was taking another sip of his coffee when the shadow fell across his table. He looked up, expecting to see a cloud blocking the sun. Instead, he saw something that made him nearly drop his cup. A massive alien spacecraft hung in the sky directly above him. Its hull was dark and covered with strange symbols. Weapon ports along its sides glowed with an ominous blue light. The ship was so large that it stretched from one end of his vision to the other. "What the hell?" he whispered. So-young looked up from her laptop when she heard the sound of breaking glass from the cafe behind her. The owner had dropped a tray of cups and was staring up at the sky with his mouth open. She followed his gaze and saw the ships floating above the city like metallic storm clouds. Her first thought was not fear. It was excitement. "Oh my God," she said, grabbing her phone. "This is incredible." Woo Jin Lee forgot all about his taxi and his meeting. He stood on the sidewalk with dozens of other people, all looking up at the alien fleet. Some people were screaming, but most were just staring in amazement. A few were already taking pictures with their phones. "Citizens of Earth," a voice boomed from speakers on the alien ships. The voice spoke in perfect Korean, which surprised many of the people below. "You are now under the authority of the Veltar Empire. Surrender immediately and you will not be harmed. Resist and you will be destroyed." The message repeated in other languages as well: English, Chinese, Japanese, and others. The aliens had clearly prepared for this moment. On his flagship, General Kethvar watched the human reaction with satisfaction. The streets below were filled with confused and frightened people. This was exactly what his training scenarios had predicted. The humans were in shock, unable to respond effectively to the sudden appearance of a superior force. "Phase 2, he ordered. "Deploy ground forces." Dozens of smaller ships detached from the main fleet and descended toward the city. They landed in major intersections, parks, and open areas. Veltar soldiers in advanced combat armor emerged from the ships and began taking positions. Their energy weapons hummed with power as they established control points throughout Seoul, but something was wrong. Kethvar frowned as he watched the tactical display. According to his intelligence, humans should be running in panic by now. Their military forces should be mobilizing in predictable patterns. Their communication networks should be overloaded with emergency broadcasts. Instead, something else was happening. Daeho stood up from his cafe table and walked closer to the nearest alien landing site. He was not running away like the general expected. He was observing, studying the alien soldiers and their equipment with the trained eye of a military officer. "Interesting," he said to himself, as he watched the aliens set up their defensive positions. "They're using standard occupation tactics, just like in the textbooks." He pulled out his phone and started recording video of the alien soldiers. Their movements, their formation, their weapons, everything that might be useful later. So-young was doing the same thing from her position at the cafe. She had switched her phone to live streaming mode and was broadcasting everything she saw to her social media followers. Within minutes, hundreds of people were watching her stream. "Guys, you are not going to believe this," she said into her phone camera. "Actual aliens just landed in Seoul. I'm watching them right now." The viewer count on her stream was climbing rapidly. 100 viewers, then 500, then 1,000. People were sharing her stream link on other social media platforms. News networks were starting to pick up the feed. Woo Jin Lee was not running either. Instead, he was walking from group to group of people, talking to them and pointing at the alien positions. As a businessman, he was used to analyzing situations and making quick decisions. He could see that the aliens had landed in predictable locations, and their soldiers were spreading out in textbook military formations. "They're not that scary," he told a group of office workers. "Look at how they move. They're following standard procedures just like our own military would do." On the Veltar flagship, Commander Zelnok approached the general with a worried expression. "Sir, we're detecting unusual communication patterns from the humans below," he reported. "Instead of emergency military channels, they're using something called social media. The volume of messages is increasing exponentially." Kethvar looked at the communication analysis display. Thousands of human devices were transmitting data across their networks, but instead of panic-driven emergency calls, the content seemed to be documentation. "What are they documenting?" he asked. "Us, sir. They're recording our positions, our equipment, our tactics, and they're sharing this information with other humans across their planet in real time." The general felt a cold sensation in his stomach. This was not what his training scenarios had predicted. Humans were supposed to be paralyzed by fear when faced with superior alien technology. They were supposed to wait for their governments and militaries to tell them what to do. Instead, they were doing something that the Veltar had never encountered before. They were learning, adapting, and communicating at a speed that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. "Sir," another officer called out, "we're receiving reports from landing sites across the planet. The human response is similar everywhere. They're not running or hiding, they're watching us and sharing information about our operations." Down in the streets of Seoul, Daeho had moved closer to one of the alien soldiers. The Veltar warrior was tall and imposing in his advanced armor. But Daeho noticed something important. The alien was nervous. His movements were slightly stiff, as if he was following a script rather than reacting naturally to the situation. "Hey," Daeho called out to So Young, who was still streaming from the cafe. "Are you getting this? Look at how they're positioned. It's like they're reading from a manual." So Young turned her camera toward the alien formation and zoomed in. Her viewers could now see what Daeho was talking about. The aliens were indeed following very rigid, predictable patterns. "Chat is going crazy," So Young said, reading the comments on her stream. "People are saying the same thing is happening in other cities. The aliens are using the same tactics everywhere." Within minutes of the invasion beginning, humans around the world were comparing notes, sharing observations, and identifying patterns in alien behavior. They were doing something that no other species the Veltar had conquered had ever done. They were turning the invasion itself into a learning experience. General Kethvar watched his perfect plan begin to unravel in ways he had never imagined possible. The humans were not reacting like victims. They were reacting like students. And they were very quick learners. Sergeant Hee-Jin Choi was at her apartment playing online games when her phone started buzzing with emergency alerts. She looked at the screen and saw news reports about alien ships appearing over major cities around the world. Her first thought was that it must be some kind of joke or movie promotion. Then, she looked out her window and saw one of the massive ships floating above Seoul. "No way," she whispered. Hyejin was a communication specialist in the South Korean military, but she was also something else that the aliens had not accounted for in their century of planning. She was a gamer. Not just any gamer, but one of the top-ranked strategy game players in the country. She had spent thousands of hours learning how to coordinate complex battles, manage resources, and adapt to changing situations in real time. She grabbed her gaming headset and connected to her usual voice chat channel. Most of her gaming friends were already online, talking excitedly about the invasion. "Guys, are you seeing this?" came the voice of her teammate Minho. "The aliens are using classic formation tactics. It's like they're playing a real-time strategy game but following a really basic build order." "I noticed that too," replied another friend, Sungwook. "They landed in all the obvious strategic locations. Just like a beginner would do." Heejin pulled up So Young's live stream on her computer while keeping her headset on. She could see the alien soldiers maintaining rigid defensive positions around their landing site. As a military communications expert, she immediately recognized what was happening. "They're not adapting," she said into her headset. "Look at their positions. They set up their perimeter and they're just staying there. No adjustments, no responses to changing conditions." "What do you mean?" asked Minho. "In a real battle, you constantly adjust your positions based on what the enemy is doing. But these aliens set up their formation and they're sticking to it no matter what. It's like they're following a script." Heejin switched to her military communication apps and started sending messages to other soldiers she knew. Within minutes, she had created an informal network of military personnel, who were all watching the invasion unfold through social media streams and news feeds. Meanwhile, across the city, delivery driver Young-Soo Kang was having the strangest day of his life. He had been making his morning deliveries when the alien ships appeared. Now he was sitting on his motorcycle at a red light, watching alien soldiers set up a checkpoint just 2 blocks ahead. Young-soo knew the streets of Seoul better than almost anyone. He had been delivering food and packages through the city for over 10 years. He knew every shortcut, every alley, every back road that tourists and even most locals never saw. He also knew something that the aliens clearly did not. The city was designed to handle millions of people moving around every day. He pulled out his phone and opened the delivery app that all the drivers used to coordinate with each other. Soon he was chatting with dozens of other drivers who were scattered throughout the city. Anyone else noticed that the aliens only set up checkpoints on the main roads? Typed driver Kyung-min. Yeah, replied another driver named Ho-seok. They're completely ignoring the side streets and alleys. It's like they only studied the major traffic routes. Young-soo smiled as he read the messages. The aliens had made a fundamental error. They had studied Seoul's main roads and highways, but they had no idea about the complex network of smaller streets that delivery drivers used every day to avoid traffic. Guys, he typed, I think we can move around this city without them even seeing us. In another part of Seoul, retired Marine Ji-woo Nam was walking his small dog when the invasion began. At 62 years old, Ji-woo thought his fighting days were long behind him. He had served in the military for 20 years before retiring to a quiet life in the city. But as he watched the alien soldiers through his apartment window, old instincts began to wake up. These aliens moved like soldiers, but they moved like soldiers who had never faced real combat. Their positions were textbook perfect but lacked the flexibility that came from actual battlefield experience. Ji-woo opened his phone and found the neighborhood community app that his apartment building used for organizing events and sharing information. The app already had hundreds of messages from residents asking what to do about the aliens. Listen, he typed. I'm a retired Marine. These aliens are using standard occupation tactics, but they're doing it wrong. They're too rigid, too predictable. If we're smart about this, we can work around them. Within minutes, other veterans in the neighborhood started responding. There was a retired Army sergeant named Bong-soo, a former Navy officer named Tae-young, and several others who had military experience. Soon they had formed an informal group of veterans who were coordinating through the neighborhood app. Back at her gaming setup, Hee-jin was watching multiple live streams from around the world while talking to her gaming friends and military contacts. What she saw amazed her. In every city, the alien response was identical. Same formation patterns, same checkpoint locations, same tactical procedures. It's like they're running the same program everywhere, she said into her headset. No variation, no adaptation to local conditions. That's not how you win strategy games, replied Min-ho. You have to adapt to what your opponent is doing. Exactly. And look at this. Hee-jin shared her screen with her gaming friends, showing them tactical maps she had created by combining information from multiple live streams. They have blind spots everywhere. Their coverage is full of holes. She started marking the blind spots on her map and sharing it with her military contacts. Soon, soldiers and veterans all over Seoul were looking at the same tactical information. Young-soo was putting Hee-jin's map to good use. He had started making deliveries again, but now he was delivering something different. He was carrying messages and supplies between different groups of people who were organizing resistance activities. The aliens at their checkpoints never even saw him as he moved through the maze of small streets and alleys. This is incredible, he said into his phone as he talked to other drivers. The aliens have no idea how this city really works. They're only watching the obvious routes. At the same time, Ji-woo was organizing his apartment building. He had convinced the building manager to let him use the community room as a coordination center. Veterans from the neighborhood were gathering there, along with regular civilians who wanted to help. The key is information, Ji-woo explained to the group. We need to know where the aliens are, what they're doing, and how they're responding to different situations. Once we understand their patterns, we can predict their actions. One of the younger residents, a college student named Da-un, raised her hand. My sister is the one streaming from the cafe downtown. She's been watching the aliens for over an hour now. They haven't changed their positions even once. Perfect, said Ji-woo. We need more eyes like that. People who can watch and report without being detected. What the aliens had not expected was that humans would turn their invasion into a massive crowdsourced intelligence operation. Thousands of people were watching alien positions, documenting their behavior, and sharing information through social media, gaming networks, delivery apps, and neighborhood groups. General Kethvar stared at his tactical displays in growing confusion. His ground forces were reporting that humans were not responding as predicted. Instead of cowering in their homes or fleeing the cities, they seemed to be moving around freely. Worse, they appeared to be coordinating their activities. How are they communicating? He demanded. We're monitoring all military and government frequencies. They're not using military channels, sir, replied Commander Zelnok. They're using civilian networks, social media, gaming platforms, delivery apps, neighborhood groups. We never thought to monitor those systems because they seemed unimportant. Unimportant? Kethavar's voice was sharp with anger. They're using them to coordinate resistance activities. Sir, our intelligence analysis focused on official government and military communication systems. We assumed that civilian networks would be used only for trivial social interactions. Kethvar realized that his century of preparation had a massive blind spot. He had studied human military forces, but he had ignored the possibility that regular civilians could organize themselves into an effective resistance network, using tools that had nothing to do with traditional warfare. On the streets of Seoul, the human response was accelerating beyond anything the aliens had planned for. Gamers were analyzing alien tactics. Delivery drivers were creating transportation networks that bypassed alien checkpoints. Veterans were organizing civilian resistance groups, and students were broadcasting everything to the world in real time. The aliens had prepared to fight the human military. They had not prepared to fight an entire city full of people who could think, learn, and adapt faster than any computer system the Veltar had ever built. Security guard Dong Hyun Lim was having the most unusual shift of his 15-year career. He worked at a 30-story office building in the heart of Seoul's business district, and his job was usually very boring. He checked IDs, watched security cameras, and made sure nobody stole office supplies. But today he was looking at his building in a completely different way. From his desk in the lobby, Dong Hyun could see alien soldiers setting up positions in the street outside. They had established a checkpoint at the main intersection and were scanning every human who tried to pass through. What they did not know was that Dong Hyun controlled every electronic system in his building. He pulled up the building management software on his computer and smiled. The aliens might have superior technology, but they clearly did not understand how modern human buildings worked. His building had smart elevators that could be programmed to stop at specific floors or refuse to move at all. The air conditioning system could be adjusted to make some areas uncomfortably hot or cold. Even the automatic doors could be locked or unlocked remotely. Time to have some fun, he said to himself. Dong Hyun had been watching the live streams on his phone, and he knew that similar invasions were happening in cities all over the world. He also knew that other humans were fighting back in creative ways. If a college student could organize resistance through social media, and delivery drivers could create hidden transportation networks, then a security guard could turn an office building into a trap. He started by testing the elevator system. Using his master control panel, he programmed the elevators to respond differently than normal. If someone pressed the button for the 10th floor, the elevator would go to the 15th floor instead. If they pressed the button for the ground floor, the elevator would stop at the basement level and refuse to open its doors for 5 minutes. Then he moved to the building's communication system. Every floor had speakers for emergency announcements, but Dong Hyun realized he could use them to create confusion and misdirection. He connected his phone to the system and started playing sounds of construction work, sirens and other urban noise through the speakers on different floors. Across the city, street artist Min Kyung-jeon was looking at the alien checkpoint from a very different perspective. She had been painting a mural on the side of a building when the invasion began, and now she was trapped on the roof with her art supplies. But Min Kyung was used to working with limited resources and turning ordinary materials into something extraordinary. She looked at her collection of spray paint cans, brushes, and other art supplies. Most people would see them as useless in a military situation, but Min Kyung saw possibilities. Spray paint could create smoke screens if applied to hot surfaces. Her collection of reflective paint could blind sensors or create false signals. Even her simple brushes and rags could be turned into tools for distraction and misdirection. Min Kyung pulled out her phone and started recording a video message. Hey everyone, it's Min Kyung. I'm stuck on a rooftop near one of the alien checkpoints, but I think I can help. Watch this. She opened several cans of different colored spray paint and began creating what looked like a normal piece of graffiti art on the rooftop. But as she worked, she was actually building something much more clever. The bright colors and reflective materials in her paint would show up clearly on any thermal or visual sensors the aliens might be using. The trick, she explained to her phone camera, is to make them look in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, tech entrepreneur Subin Kim was in her downtown office, staring at her computer screens with growing excitement. Subin ran a small company that developed smart city applications, and she knew Seoul's electronic infrastructure better than almost anyone. She had spent years creating programs that could coordinate traffic lights, manage building systems, and optimize city services. Now she was looking at that same infrastructure as a weapon. If they want to occupy our city, she said to herself, they're going to have to deal with all of our city's systems. Subin started by accessing the traffic control network. With a few keystrokes, she could change traffic light patterns throughout the city. She could make lights stay red for longer periods, create traffic jams in specific areas, or clear routes that humans needed to use. The aliens had positioned themselves based on normal traffic patterns, but Subin could change those patterns whenever she wanted. Next, she moved to the city's digital billboard system. Seoul had hundreds of electronic signs and displays throughout the business district. Subin realized she could use them to send messages to other humans or to confuse the alien sensors with bright flashing lights and moving patterns. But her most ambitious idea involved the city's smart car network. Many newer vehicles in Seoul were connected to the internet and could receive updates and commands remotely. Subin had helped develop some of these systems, and she still had administrative access to several of them. Let's see how they handle a few hundred cars moving in unexpected ways, she said, as she started writing code. Back at his security desk, Dong-hyun was putting his building trap into action. A group of alien soldiers had entered the lobby, apparently planning to use the building as an observation post. They moved with the same rigid precision that humans had been observing all morning, following what was clearly a predetermined plan. The lead alien pressed the elevator button, expecting to go to the top floor where they could set up their equipment. Instead, the elevator took them to the basement parking garage. When the doors opened, the aliens found themselves in a dark, confusing maze of concrete pillars and parked cars. Dong-hyun watched them on his security cameras and activated the next part of his plan. He turned on the building's fire suppression system in the basement, filling the area with harmless but disorienting foam. At the same time, he started playing loud construction noises through the speakers, making it difficult for the aliens to communicate with each other. The alien soldiers tried to return to the elevator, but Dong-hyun had already programmed it to ignore their calls. They were stuck in the basement with no easy way out, surrounded by foam and noise, completely cut off from their command structure. On her rooftop, Min-kyung was finishing her latest art project. She had created a large, colorful design that would be visible from the alien ships overhead. But the design was not just decoration. The patterns and colors were carefully chosen to overload visual sensors and create false readings on thermal imaging equipment. She had also set up several small fires using safe materials from her art supplies. The fires created heat signatures that would confuse thermal sensors, making it appear as if there were many more humans on the rooftop than there actually were. Art is about creating illusions, she explained to her phone camera, making people see things that aren't really there, or miss things that are right in front of them. Min-kyung's live stream was being watched by thousands of people around the world. Other artists and creative people began copying her techniques, using their own materials and skills to create confusion and misdirection for the alien forces. Subin was having remarkable success with her electronic warfare campaign. She had managed to take control of over 300 smart cars throughout the city, and she was using them to create carefully orchestrated chaos. Cars were driving in circles around alien checkpoints, blocking roads that the aliens needed to use, and creating traffic patterns that made no logical sense. The aliens had studied human transportation systems, but they had studied them assuming that humans would behave rationally. They had no preparation for dealing with cars that moved according to a hidden intelligence, following patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully planned. Subin also activated her network of digital billboards, turning them into a citywide communication system. Messages flashed across screens throughout Seoul, telling humans where alien positions were located. which streets were safe to use, and how to avoid detection. The aliens could see the messages too, but they were written in internet slang and local references that the alien translators could not understand. General Kethvar stared at his command displays in growing frustration. His perfectly planned invasion was falling apart in ways that made no sense. His soldiers were getting trapped in buildings, confused by electronic systems and overwhelmed by sensory interference. The human resistance was not following any recognizable military doctrine. "Sir," reported Commander Zelnok, "our ground forces are requesting support. They're encountering resistance tactics that don't appear in any of our training scenarios." "What kind of tactics?" Kethavar demanded. "Buildings that fight back, sir. Electronic systems that seem to have been turned against us. Transportation networks that behave irrationally. And some kind of sensory warfare using what appears to be human art." Kethavar had spent a century preparing to fight human soldiers, human tanks, and human aircraft. He had never imagined that he would be fighting human buildings, human traffic lights, and human graffiti. The humans were not just resisting the invasion. They were turning their entire city into a weapon, using tools and systems that the aliens had never even considered as potential threats. Food truck owner Changwoo Park was supposed to be serving lunch to office workers by now. Instead, he was parked 3 blocks away from his usual spot, staring at alien soldiers who had taken over the small plaza where he normally did business. Changwoo had been running his food truck for 8 years, and he knew every inch of his mobile kitchen better than his own apartment. As he watched the aliens through his windshield, Changwoo began to see his truck differently. The propane tanks that powered his cooking equipment were not just fuel sources. They were potential explosives. The cooking oil that he used for frying could become a weapon if heated to the right temperature. Even his collection of kitchen knives could be useful in ways he had never considered. Before Changwoo pulled out his phone and joined the food truck drivers group chat that all the vendors used to coordinate their locations and share information about good business spots. The chat was already full of messages from other drivers who were dealing with the same situation. "Anyone else thinking what I'm thinking about the propane tanks?" typed a driver named Seong Hwan. "Yeah," replied another driver named Myung Soo. "We've got mobile kitchens with fuel, fire, and sharp objects. Plus, we know how to move around the city without being noticed." Changwoo smiled as he read the messages. Food truck drivers were used to being invisible to most people. Office workers saw them as part of the background scenery of city life. The aliens probably saw them the same way if they saw them at all. "I've got an idea," Changwoo typed. "Meet me at the Riverside parking area. Bring everything you can carry." Across the city, construction worker Jin Ho Song was operating a tower crane 40 stories above the street. From his position in the crane's cabin, he had one of the best views of the alien invasion in the entire city. He could see their ships, their ground positions, and their movement patterns from an angle that nobody else had access to. Jin Ho had been working construction for 15 years, and he understood heavy machinery the way other people understood computers or cars. His crane could lift 20 tons of steel and concrete with precision. It could reach out over 200 meters in any direction, and right now it was positioned directly above one of the main alien staging areas. He looked down at the alien soldiers setting up equipment in the construction site below. They had chosen the location because it was a large open area that gave them good visibility in all directions. What they did not realize was that construction sites were designed to have heavy objects moved around them. Constantly, Jin Ho reached for his radio and contacted the other crane operators working on nearby buildings. "Hey, anyone else got aliens in their work area?" "Yeah," came the reply from crane operator Il Sung working 2 blocks away. "They're all over the place down here." "You thinking what I'm thinking? Drop some concrete on them?" Jin Ho laughed. "Not exactly, but close." Meanwhile, in a small kindergarten classroom, teacher Yoon Ji-yu was trying to keep 25 children calm while alien ships flew overhead. The children were scared but also curious, asking endless questions about the strange visitors from space. Yoonji had spent 5 years learning how to manage groups of energetic children, and those skills were proving unexpectedly useful in the current situation. "Miss Yu," asked 6-year-old student Bo-ra, "why are the aliens just standing in the same places? In movies, they usually move around more." Yoonji looked out the classroom window at the alien checkpoint visible from the school. Bo-ra was right. The aliens had been in the exact same positions for over an hour, never adjusting or adapting to changes around them. "That's a very good observation, Bo-ra," Yoonji said. Sometimes when people don't know what to expect, they stick to their original plan even when it's not working very well. As a teacher, Chunji was used to creating organized movement patterns for large groups of people. Every day, she guided children through complex activities like fire drills, playground games, and field trips. She knew how to move groups safely and efficiently, even in stressful situations. She pulled out her phone and started sending messages to other teachers and school administrators throughout the city. If the aliens were not adapting to changing conditions, then organized groups of civilians could move around them using careful planning and coordination. Back at his crane, Jinho was putting his plan into action. Instead of dropping concrete on the aliens, he was doing something much more creative. He was using his crane to rearrange the construction site in ways that would make it impossible for the aliens to maintain their current positions. Jinho carefully picked up a stack of steel beams and moved them to create a wall between the alien soldiers and their landing ship. Then he moved several concrete barriers to block the alien sightlines to the street. With each movement of his crane, he was reshaping the battlefield in favor of the humans. The alien soldiers below tried to adjust their positions, but they moved slowly and predictably. Jinho could see exactly where they were going to move next, and he used his crane to place obstacles in their path before they got there. "This is like playing a real-time strategy game," he said into his radio, "except the other player is really, really slow." Chang Wu had gathered 8 other food truck drivers at the riverside parking area. Together, they had created an impressive collection of improvised weapons and tools. Propane tanks that could be turned into explosives, hot cooking oil that could create barriers or distractions, and enough sharp kitchen implements to equip a small army. But Chang Wu's real plan was not about the weapons. It was about mobility and camouflage. "The aliens see us as background noise," he explained to the other drivers. "We're just part of the normal city scenery. They're not going to pay attention to food trucks moving around, especially if we act like we're just trying to find customers." The group of food trucks began moving through the city, using their knowledge of back streets and service roads to avoid the main alien checkpoints. To any observer, they looked like vendors searching for good business locations. In reality, they were conducting reconnaissance and positioning themselves for coordinated strikes against alien positions. Gamer cafe owner Seok Jin Bae was having the most productive day his business had ever seen. His cafe was usually busy with young people playing online games, but today it had become something like a military command center. Dozens of gamers were using the cafe's high-speed internet and advanced computer equipment to coordinate drone activities throughout the city. Seoul had thousands of recreational drones owned by hobbyists, photographers, and delivery companies. Individually, the drones were just toys or tools, but Seok-jin and his customers had figured out how to coordinate them into swarms that could overwhelm alien sensors and provide intelligence to human resistance. "Groups is like controlling units in a strategy game," explained regular customer Taemin, "except the units are real and the enemy doesn't know how to handle them." The gamers were using modified game controllers to pilot multiple drones at once, creating coordinated flight patterns that confused alien tracking systems. The drones were too small and numerous for the aliens to shoot down effectively, but they provided perfect surveillance of alien positions and movements. Fitness instructor Yuna Kim was leading a group of parkour enthusiasts through the urban landscape in ways that the aliens had never imagined possible. Yuna and her students knew how to move through the city using rooftops, fire escapes, and building connections that most people never noticed. The aliens had studied human transportation systems, but they had focused on roads, subways, and other obvious routes. They had no idea that humans could move efficiently through the three-dimensional environment of the city itself, jumping between buildings and climbing structures that appeared impassable. Yuna's group had become a mobile intelligence network, able to observe alien positions from unexpected angles and deliver messages between resistance groups without being detected. They moved like shadows through the vertical landscape of Seoul, always staying one step ahead of the slow-moving alien patrols. General Kethvar watched his tactical displays with growing alarm. His invasion force was not just failing to advance, it was being systematically outmaneuvered by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. His soldiers reported being attacked by construction equipment operated by invisible enemies. His sensor networks were overwhelmed by swarms of tiny flying objects. His communication systems were being jammed by what appeared to be kitchen equipment and art supplies. "Sir," Commander Zelnok reported, "our forces are requesting immediate reinforcement. The human resistance appears to be using every aspect of their civilian infrastructure as a weapon." "How is that possible?" Kethavar demanded. "Our intelligence indicated that human civilians were non-combatants." "It appears our definition of non-combatant was incorrect, sir. The humans are not distinguishing between military and civilian roles. Everyone appears to be participating in the resistance using whatever skills and tools they have available." Kethavar realized that his fundamental understanding of human society had been wrong. He had assumed that only trained soldiers would fight back against an invasion. He had never considered that teachers, food vendors, construction workers, and video game players could become an effective military force. General Kethavar stood in his command center, watching his perfect invasion plan collapse in real time. The tactical displays that had once shown orderly Veltar positions now looked like a chaotic mess of red warning symbols and error messages. His ground forces were scattered, confused, and unable to maintain any kind of coherent formation. "Report," he commanded, his voice sharp with frustration. Commander Zelnok approached with a data tablet, but his usual confidence was gone. "Sir, we are experiencing what appears to be cascade failure across all operational sectors. Our forces are unable to maintain positions. Our communication networks are being disrupted, and our sensor systems are overwhelmed." "Define cascade failure," Kethavar said through gritted teeth. "Each human countermeasure is creating problems that multiply and spread to other systems. When our sensors are jammed by their art installations, our soldiers cannot coordinate properly. When our soldiers cannot coordinate, they cannot respond to attacks from their construction equipment. When they cannot respond to construction equipment, they abandon positions, which allows the humans to capture our technology." Kethavar looked at the screens showing feeds from around the planet. The same pattern was repeating in every major city. Human resistance was not just growing, it was accelerating exponentially. Each successful human action inspired 10 more creative solutions that the Veltar had never anticipated. In Seoul, college chemistry student Jae-hyun was hunched over a makeshift laboratory in his dormitory room. Jae-hyun was supposed to be studying for final exams, but instead he was analyzing samples of alien technology that had been collected by other students and posted online. "This is incredible," he said to his study group, who were gathered around his desk watching him work. "Look at these molecular structures." Jae-hyun had been studying chemistry for 4 years, and he had always been curious about how different compounds affected biological systems. When the first pieces of alien technology became available through social media networks, he immediately started trying to understand how they worked. What he discovered amazed him. The alien neural implants that controlled their soldiers' behavior were based on biological systems that were remarkably similar to human brain chemistry. The aliens had evolved on a different world, but they used the same basic chemical processes for neural transmission that humans did. "If their neural chemistry is similar to ours," Jae-hyun explained to his study group, "then compounds that affect human brain function might affect them too." His study partner, chemistry student Mi-young, looked at the data on Jae-hyun's computer screen. "Are you saying we could make something that would interfere with their implants?" "Not just interfere," Jae-hyun replied with growing excitement. "I think we could shut them down completely." Jae-hyun opened his chemistry textbook and started looking up formulas for compounds that were known to disrupt neural transmission in humans. Most of these compounds were dangerous and strictly controlled. But Jae-hyun realized that he could create a similar effect using much safer chemicals that were available in any college chemistry lab. "We need to test this," he said, "and if it works, we need to share it with everyone." Meanwhile, across the city, the effects of human creativity were becoming impossible for the aliens to ignore. Changwoo's food truck convoy had successfully disabled 3 alien checkpoints using coordinated propane explosions and hot oil attacks. Jinho's crane operations had reshaped the downtown construction site so thoroughly that the aliens could no longer use it as a staging area. The drone swarms coordinated by Seokjin's gaming cafe had mapped every alien position in the city and were providing real-time intelligence to resistance groups. Yuna's parkour teams were moving messages and supplies between different resistance cells faster than the aliens could. track. But the most devastating blow to the alien invasion was happening, in ways that the aliens could not even detect. The humans were learning. Every successful resistance action was being recorded, analyzed, and shared through social media networks. Techniques that worked in Seoul were being copied in Tokyo, London, New York, and every other city under attack. The humans were not just fighting. Individually, they were creating a global network of shared knowledge that improved with every passing minute. General Cathfar watched reports coming in from invasion forces around the planet. The pattern was the same everywhere. Initial success followed by rapid deterioration as humans adapted to alien tactics faster than the aliens could adapt to human creativity. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we are detecting massive increases in human communication activity. They appear to be sharing tactical information across their entire planet in real time." "How is that possible?" Cathfar demanded. "Our analysis indicated that human governments and militaries operated independently. There should be no global coordination. They are not using government or military networks, sir. They are using civilian communication systems that we did not consider militarily significant. Social media, gaming networks, academic forums, and commercial applications." Cathfar realized that his century of preparation had missed something fundamental about human society. He had studied their governments and militaries, but he had ignored the informal networks that connected ordinary humans across the planet. Now those networks were being used to coordinate a resistance effort that spanned the entire globe. In his dormitory laboratory, Jae-hyun had successfully synthesized his neural disruption compound. The formula was surprisingly simple, using chemicals that were available in any basic chemistry lab, or even in many household cleaning products. He had tested it on a piece of alien technology that had been recovered from a crashed drone, and the results exceeded his wildest expectations. The compound had completely shut down the alien device within seconds of exposure. "This is it," he said to his study group. "This could stop them." Jae-hyun immediately posted his formula on every social media platform he could access, along with detailed instructions for synthesis and application. Within minutes, the information was being shared around the world. Chemistry students, teachers, and anyone with basic laboratory access began producing the compound. The aliens had superior technology, but they had not anticipated facing an enemy that could reverse engineer their neural control systems and develop countermeasures in real time using nothing more than undergraduate chemistry knowledge and internet communication. In Seoul, the first field test of Jae-hyun's compound happened when delivery driver Young-soo approached an alien checkpoint with a spray bottle full of the solution. The alien soldiers had grown accustomed to seeing delivery drivers moving through the city, and they paid no attention to him as he approached. Young-soo sprayed the compound into the air near the alien soldiers and immediately saw results. The aliens stopped moving. Their energy weapons powered down and their communication systems went silent. Within 30 seconds, the entire checkpoint was non-functional. Young-soo immediately called his driver network with the news. "It works. The chemistry student's formula actually works." Word spread through the resistance networks like wildfire. Food truck drivers began adding the compound to their cooking equipment, creating aerosol dispersal systems. Street artists mixed it with their spray paint. Construction workers added it to their water systems. Gaming cafe owners put it in their air conditioning units. Within an hour, the compound was being distributed throughout Seoul, using every method that the creative human resistance could devise. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy that could literally turn the air itself into a weapon against their technology. General Cathfar watched his invasion force collapse in real time. Soldier after soldier went offline as their neural implants failed. Ships began crashing as their control systems shut down. Communication networks went silent as the human compound spread through alien positions like an invisible plague. "Sir," Commander Zelnok reported, his voice filled with panic. "We are experiencing total system failure across all operational units. Whatever the humans have deployed, it is shutting down our neural interface technology." "How many units are affected?" 70% and rising, sir. The compound appears to be spreading through our positions faster than we can evacuate." Cathfar realized that his century of preparation had been rendered useless by a college student with access to basic chemistry equipment and an internet connection. The humans had not just defeated his invasion, They had turned his own technology against him, using knowledge that any educated human could access. But the most terrifying part was not just that the humans had found a way to defeat Veltar technology. It was how quickly they had done it, and how rapidly they were sharing that knowledge across their entire species. The aliens had studied human military capabilities for 100 years, but they had never understood the true nature of human warfare. It was not just about weapons or tactics. It was about the ability to learn, adapt, and innovate faster than any enemy could respond. In 12 minutes, the humans had transformed from helpless victims into a species that could reverse engineer alien technology, develop countermeasures, and deploy them globally using nothing more than creativity, communication, and basic scientific knowledge. The invasion was not just failing, it was over. Taxi driver Hyunwoo Shin was having the strangest day of his life, and that was saying something after what had happened in Seoul over the past 12 minutes. He had been driving through the city when the alien ships first appeared, and his dashcam had been recording everything that happened since then. Now he was sitting in his taxi, watching alien soldiers stumble around like confused children. Their weapons were silent, their armor was powered down, and many of them were removing their helmets and breathing Earth's air for the first time. Some were sitting on the ground looking lost and frightened. Others were trying to communicate with humans using hand gestures, since their translation devices had stopped working. "This is unbelievable," Hyunwoo said into his phone as he continued recording. 10 minutes ago, these guys were trying to conquer the world. Now they look like they need help finding their way home. The alien soldier nearest to his taxi was a young-looking Veltar who could not have been much older than a human teenager. The alien was sitting on the curb, holding his helmet in his hands and staring at the sky where his people's ships were falling like metal rain. Hyunwoo rolled down his window. "Hey, you okay?" The alien looked at him with large, frightened eyes. Without his neural implants, he was no longer a perfect soldier following orders. He was just a scared young being who was very far from home. Captain Daeho Kim walked through the streets of Seoul, still holding his cup of coffee from the cafe where this whole adventure had started. The coffee was cold now, but he did not mind. He was too amazed by what he was seeing to care about anything as simple as coffee temperature. Everywhere he looked, ordinary humans were helping confused alien soldiers. Street vendors were offering them food and water. Medical students were treating aliens who had been injured when their equipment shut down. Even children were approaching the aliens with curiosity rather than fear, offering them small gifts and trying to communicate through drawings and gestures. 12 minutes, Daeho said to himself. The whole invasion lasted 12 minutes. He pulled out his phone and started making calls to his military superiors. Someone needed to coordinate the collection of alien technology and the care of alien prisoners. But the military response would have to be careful. The aliens were no longer a threat, and the humans who had defeated them seemed more interested in helping than harming their former enemies. So Young Park was still at the cafe, but she was no longer streaming the invasion. Instead, she was interviewing humans who had participated in the resistance. Her viewer count had grown to over 1 million people worldwide, and news organizations were asking to use her footage. "The most amazing thing," she said into her phone camera, "is that nobody planned this. Nobody was in charge. We just all started doing what we knew how to do, and somehow it worked." She turned her camera to show the street outside the cafe, where aliens and humans were sitting together, trying to communicate. Some aliens were drawing pictures of their home world. Some humans were showing aliens photos of their families. The invasion had ended, but something much more interesting was beginning. General Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, which was no longer flying. His ship had crashed in the Han River when its control systems failed, and now he was waiting for human rescue teams to reach him. His century of preparation had been defeated by a species that could learn faster than he could plan. Commander Zelnok approached him, no longer the confident officer he had been just minutes before. "Sir, we are receiving communication attempts from the human governments. They appear to be offering assistance to our stranded personnel." "Assistance?" Kethvar could not hide his surprise. "We just tried to conquer their planet." "Yes, sir. But they seem more interested in making sure our soldiers are safe than in punishing them for the invasion attempt." Kethvar looked out through the damaged view screen of his ship. Human rescue boats were approaching through the river water. The boats were piloted by the same species that had just humiliated the entire Veltar Empire. and they were coming to help rather than to attack. "I do not understand these humans," he said quietly. Wu Jinli finally made it to his meeting, 3 hours late and with the most incredible story his business partners had ever heard. The meeting was supposed to be about quarterly sales reports, but instead everyone spent the time watching news feeds and social media videos of the alien invasion and its aftermath. "Look at this," said his business partner Junho, showing his tablet to the group. "The humans in New York figured out how to use the subway system to trap alien forces underground. The humans in Tokyo turned their train network into a giant coordination system. Every city found a different way to fight back." Wu Jin nodded as he watched the videos. Each city had used its unique characteristics and resources to defeat the aliens. But the most impressive thing was how quickly information had spread between cities, allowing successful techniques to be copied and improved around the world. "We didn't just win," Wu Jin said. "We learned how to win, and we taught each other faster than they could adapt." College chemistry student Jae-hyun Oh had become the most famous person on Earth practically overnight. His neural disruption formula was being called the compound that saved humanity, and universities around the world were offering him scholarships and research positions. But Jae-hyun was more interested in what was happening to the alien technology. Now that the neural control systems had been shut down, human scientists could study alien equipment safely. The technology was incredibly advanced, and humans were already beginning to understand how it worked. "The interesting thing," Jae-hyun explained to the crowd of reporters gathered outside his dormitory, "is that their technology is not really that different from ours. It's more advanced, but it follows the same basic principles. We should be able to learn from it and maybe even improve it." Some of the reporters asked if he was worried about the aliens returning with better preparation. Jae-hyun smiled and shook his head. "They spent 100 years preparing to fight us as we were," he said. "But we're not the same species we were 12 minutes ago. We learned things about ourselves today that we never knew before. If they come back, they'll be facing a completely different humanity." Across Seoul, the cleanup and recovery process was unlike anything that had ever happened after a military conflict. Instead of destruction and casualties, the city was filled with disabled alien equipment and confused alien soldiers who needed help and medical attention. Food truck owner Changwoo Park had returned to his usual spot and was serving free meals to both humans and aliens. Many of the aliens had never tasted human food before, and they seemed genuinely amazed by the variety and flavor. "You know what's funny?" Changwoo said to his alien customers, using hand gestures since they could not understand his words. "I spent the morning figuring out how to turn my cooking equipment into weapons. Now I'm using it to make food again. I think I like this better." Security guard Donghyun Lim had become something of a local hero after his building trap video went viral. But he was more interested in helping the alien soldiers who had been trapped in his basement. They were young and scared, and they reminded him of the new security guards he trained at his job. "They're just kids doing what they were told," he explained to the news crews. Once their control system shut down, they stopped being enemies and started being people who needed help. The global response to the aftermath was equally unprecedented. Instead of demanding punishment for the invasion force, human governments around the world were working together to provide care for stranded aliens and to establish communication with the Veltar Empire. Taxi driver Hyun Woo-shin's dashcam footage became one of the most important historical documents of the invasion. His video showed the complete timeline of events from the perspective of an ordinary human, going about his daily life. News historians were calling it the most important amateur footage since the invention of video recording. But Hyun-woo was not thinking about history. He was thinking about the young alien soldier who was now sitting in the passenger seat of his taxi, drawing pictures of his homeworld and trying to learn Korean words. "Earth," Hyun-woo said slowly, pointing to the ground. "Earth," the alien repeated, his pronunciation close but not quite right. "Seoul," Hyun-woo said, pointing to the city around them. "Seoul," the alien said, nodding with understanding. "Veltar," the alien said, pointing to himself. "Human," Hyun-woo replied, pointing to himself. They sat together in the taxi, two beings from different worlds, learning each other's languages and trying to understand how they had gone from enemies to friends in the space of 12 minutes. The invasion that was supposed to conquer Earth had instead revealed something that the Veltar Empire had never encountered before. A species that could transform a military defeat into a diplomatic opportunity and turn an invasion into the beginning of an interspecies friendship. General Kethvar would eventually write in his official report to the Veltar Empire. Species classification: unpredictable. Threat level extreme. Recommendation: negotiate, do not fight. Note: humans do not become weaker when threatened. They become something entirely different, and they do it faster than any empire can prepare for. The 12-minute war was over, but the age of human-alien cooperati